And as we mentioned before, Uruguay really needs to make an upset here. It's going to be difficult, though, as Abdullah representing Canada is going to be using another rain team, as we saw Canada likes to use, this time with Klefki and Sinistra, something we don't really get to see often. I think very recently in the most recent American regional, Stefan Mott used something very similar to this, that being the Sinistra and the Klefki, just kind of having those screens which are so strong right now. I think being able to mitigate a lot of the strong offensive options, things like the guard chomp, things like the Dragapult, stopping that damage from immediately coming, and then also supporting your team with things like Thunder Wave to slow down the speeds on your opponent's team and get some of the middling speed Pokemon like Archaludon or your Basculesian without rain, kind of getting them in the positions where they can outspeed your opponents.
Yeah, and then you also have these support-ish Pokemon. I say ish because Maushold can provide support, but it can also provide a ton of damage with that population bomb. Sinistra having the ability to heal your own Pokemon in addition to threatening burns with Matcha Gacha or strength or attack drops with Strength Sap. The Pelipper as well, providing Tailwind support. Like overall, while this is very much a rain team with the presence of the Basculesian and the Archaludon really benefiting from having that weather status on the field, thanks to the Maushold, the Klefki, and the Sinistra, even if you do enter a weather war, I don't think it's necessarily like the end of the world if you don't have rain up once that battle settles. You can find ways around it. But, you know, fortunately for Abdullah, his opponent Diego is actually bringing a rain-ish team of his own, opting to bring a Pelipper and Archaludon and a Maushold, but with Rillaboom, Dragonite, and King Gambit as the three differentiating Pokemon.
And what I think is really important here, Gabby, to differentiate between the two teams is while they both have that Archaludon Pelipper core supported with that Maushold, this Maushold instead has beat up instead of the population bomb, opting for the safety goggles and kind of having a real item. I think Wide Lens on Abdullah's team is kind of a fake item, just allowing you to hit the maximum population bomb, but doesn't really provide a lot of utility outside of that. While it doesn't come up here, safety goggles for Maushold on Diego's team here is really good for things like a Moongus when you don't have Rillaboom on the field for fake out, or you maybe don't have a Terraflying Terra Blast from your Dragonite, really being able to redirect those spores, which could otherwise be annoying for this team. Maushold as well, having the beat up, isn't going to be able to get your Archaludon to max, but still is going to get 4 stacks on your Archaludon for those defense boosts with the stamina. Something important here to note in the matchup as well, if you are Thunder Waved, the way beat up works is if your Pokemon are healthy. I learned this recently, but it's not just the Pokemon that are alive in terms of HP. It's also in terms of status. So if Abdullah manages to weave in something like a Thunder Wave on one of the Pokemon, Maushold's beat up actually is only going to hit 3 times instead of 4.
Good to know. It's always really helpful to review those niche mechanics because, you know, especially going into a matchup like this where it can come into play, you know, I think stamina on Archaludon on Abdullah's side of the field is going to be really important given the presence of physical attackers on Diego's side of the field. That's something that's great to keep in mind. But let's go ahead and jump into game number 1 and see just how Abdullah and Diego are going to approach not necessarily a mirror matchup of team, but certainly a team that shares a few themes between both variants. And while it looks like Abdullah on the left-hand side of the field, or right-hand side, nope, left-hand side of the field is going to be going pure rain with that Pelipper and Basculesian, Maushold Dragonite from his opponent.
And I think really stepping on the gas here, the Pelipper and Basculesian is offering so much offense. Instead of having something like the Klefki to risk Thunder Wave missing or something like that, just setting up the rain, knowing that Diego doesn't really have an option like the Torkoal or maybe a Whimsicott to change the weather, knowing that you can get rain up for essentially free and being able to dish out damage to Basculesian, you just trade so well. This Dragonite here actually terastallizing out of its resist from this water move, so this Basculesian is going to be able to wave crash into either target to do a lot of damage. This Dragonite maybe wanting to go for something like a Terra Blast. Wave crash going into that Dragonite, actually almost one-shotting it. Notably here, this Dragonite isn't multi-scale, which explains why it took so much.
Maushold following up with a taunt to stop any potential tailwinds. However, Abdullah went full on the offense, following up with a weather ball to deal that little bit of extra damage to pick up the knockout on that Dragonite, who notably is going to be slower than the opposing Caliber. You know, I think being slower than the Vasculesian in the rain, thanks to its Swift Swim ability, was kind of anticipated. But to see the Pelipper outspeed him and lock in that KO is really great information for both these trainers. We will see Diego adjust and send in that Archaludon, which is going to be a bit more of a threat in this board position, but still, it looks like a threat that Abdullah does have the tools to handle quite nicely.
And absolutely, those Electro Shots are going to do a lot to both these Pokemon. Abdullah opting for the Water Terra on the Basculesian, not going to be able to Terra out of its weakness to this Electro Shot. Kind of free reigns for Diego here. And with the Terastallization gone, though, on the Archaludon, you're not really going to have an option like Grass, even though you resist the Wave Crashes already. But Abdullah just keeping with the pressure, just Terastallizing into water, not really caring about these resists and things like that, just trying to do as much damage as possible. Kind of saying to Diego, hey, if you don't want to take this damage, I'm going to make your Maushold follow me. Otherwise, you're going to keep taking tons and tons of damage from the Basculesian, and you're just trading so positively here. But this beat up, breaking the Focus Sash into Pelipper, maybe leads me to believe this Archaludon is following up with an Electro Shot.
Yeah, the Pelipper being the interesting target here, if only because once Taunt wears off, it could opt for a Tailwind, which would ensure that Abdullah's own Archaludon would be faster and could lead to a very favorable endgame for him. So we do see that Electro Shot coming through from the opposing Archaludon. Will take a moment to boost his special attack as the rain is active on the field, but when it does opt to attack, will connect with that Pelipper for the KO. I think the most interesting thing about that turn for me, though, is that yes, the Maushold is able to break the Focus Sash. Yes, the Maushold is able to taunt the opposing Pelipper. I do wonder if we are going to see Diego opt for a Follow Me this turn, now that it seems like he has the board positioning he was looking for, or if he will just let Abdullah go for more attacks into the opposing Archaludon, as I do believe a Wave Crash plus definitely a Draco Meteor from the opposing Archaludon would be enough to KO.
Absolutely, and as we kind of been mentioning for each of the Pokemon here, I think another aspect of these mirror matches are the speed. Notably, the Pelipper was faster than the Dragonite before, maybe alluding that it was a speed boosting nature there on the Pelipper. And I'm really curious to see how this Archaludon is going to be in terms of speed compared to Diego's. Because if you are faster, right, then you have the advantage. That means you get to attack first. We see the Wave Crash under that Swift Swim. Speaking of speed, able to knock out that Maushold before he gets to do anything. Choosing to follow me, as you mentioned, sacrificing itself, getting rid of the Basculesian, finally that threat's gone. But now here, depending on which Archaludon is faster, is going to kind of determine which is going to be able to hit the other first. As we see, Diego's actually outspeeds Abdullah's here. That body press doing so much damage, having the opportunity to get those boosts from the Basculesian before when it hit it.
Yeah, and the fact that the Maushold denied an additional defense boost to the opposing Archaludon there does mean that I think Abdullah's Archaludon was able to hold on through that attack. I think it would have been close had that Wave Crash connected there, but still, you know, Maushold, I think, did a great job of just keeping the Archaludon on the board, and now that we're down to the final two Pokemon from both these trainers, you know, yes, Abdullah does have the Archaludon of his own on the field and can start threatening some big damage with that. There are still a few more turns of rain left. Can heal yourself up with the Sinistra as well. Your opponent, Diego, is going to be able to send in their final two Pokemon at full health. And we see that first Pokemon is, or excuse me, their final Pokemon at full health. That is going to be that King Gambit as his last Pokemon standing. So while things aren't necessarily over yet, you do have to wonder, you know, if Diego is able to connect an attack against the opposing Archaludon and bring it down to just Sinistra versus King Gambit, would he have the opportunity to win?
Yeah, and unfortunately here, without something like a safety goggles on the Kingambit, instead of opting for the black glasses, is going to be redirected by the Sinistra here. And even if Sinistra was somehow gone and you were able to weave in another turn between this body press, I don't think with the defense boost on the Archaludon or Archaludon, you would be able to get through to it. You maybe need something like a critical hit, but because of the defensive boosts, that body press is just going to knock out that Kingambit, and Abdullah is going to take game one.
Yeah, and I really love that end game of saving the Sinistra for the end from Abdullah. You know, we saw just how much of a boost that hospitality ability gave that Pokemon in terms of its health. You know, having the ability to redirect those finals attacks really opened up the opportunity for the Archaludon to go on the offense. And I think that Abdullah was very smartly able to manage just his Pokemon on the field to give himself that advantage at the end. I do wonder if things would have been a little bit different. Maybe if we saw a couple of follow me's from that Mousehold from Diego's side of the field a little bit earlier on, and maybe that's an adjustment that he'll consider going into game number 2. But overall, it did feel like it was a bit of a close game, especially those first turns as the two were trying to trade to figure out, okay, what is my opponent's priorities and how can I sort of stop them from really setting up the Archaludon in Diego's case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Diego is maybe wishing to get a little bit more value out of their Dragonite. Losing your Trostalization like that turn 1 feels really, really bad. But at least you get some information out of it, right? You know that the Pelipper now outspeeds your Dragonite, so maybe Diego doesn't have to opt for their Trostalization. They can stay resistant to those water type attacks, and maybe even go for something like an Extreme Speed, knowing that you're undersped. Try to fish off an attack into that Pelipper, Extreme Speed into it, or maybe go for a Stopping Tantrum. And again, maybe just try to save your Trostalization for something like the Kingambit in the back to fire off stronger Kowtow Cleaves to maybe get through the Archaludon. Maybe save it for I'm not really sure, and maybe another Pokemon, but just don't waste it again like that turn 1. And hopefully Diego adjusts that in game 2.
Well, we have game 2 queued up and ready to go, so let's see how Diego and Abdullah are going to adjust their game plans. And while you would assume there's a lead difference from Diego, you'd be right. It's the Kingambit and the Mousehold, but it's actually going to be the Mousehold and the Archaludon from Abdullah.
I really like this lead from both players. Diego recognizing that the Dragonite wasn't the strongest thing last time and realizing that they maybe need Terastallization for it if it's the only thing they can Terastallize, or maybe, as I kind of alluded to, the Terra Dark on the Kingambit just able to do so much damage with something like a Taunt or even a Follow Me from this Mousehold having a lot of utility. You can either taunt Abdullah's Mousehold or just Follow Me and attack if you think the Archaludon is just going to go for a body press, or even Abdullah opts for the Population Bomb into their own Archaludon as well. There's lots of different moving pieces here. Which Mousehold is going to attack and what target?
Well, knowing that there is a population bomb on the table, that does mean you have to take precautions. And for Diego, that Terra Ghost on his own Mousehold plays off so well, as it allows him to dodge the body press from the opposing Archaludon and gives Kingambit the opportunity to get a +2 attack boost thanks to Swords Dance.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I was talking about before, where the Archaludon now is going to have to deal with this Kingambit, right? You can't body press to do super effective damage to this Mousehold. You now have to switch in Pelipper to Electroshot it, or you have to, go for measly Flash Attack, Flash Cannon damage, or drop your special attack with Draco Meteor. There's downsides to each of those plays that Abdullah has here, while Diego has this +2 Kingambit that threatens so much damage into both these Pokemon. Pelipper does come in here as Mousehold is just going to follow me away again. Makes a lot of sense, right? Those population bombs are going to hurt if you don't redirect them, as an Electroshock comes out here from the Archaludon.
Not only that, you're redirecting any potential damage from the opposing onto the opposing Kingambit from Abdullah. And while Electroshot isn't necessarily like, a one-hit knockout before you start getting these boosts, if you can just look at your opponent and say, you know what, I see you using Electroshot to boost your special attack, I'm just going to get to +4 attack on my own Pokemon. Diego has found himself in a very scary board position for Abdullah, because you still have health, you still can protect. The big question here is Kingambit going to go for like a priority attack with a Sucker Punch, or is it going to go straight for that Kowtow Cleave?
And I really like that play from Diego, recognizing that if you do go for Kowtow Cleaves, because of the bulk that Abdullah's team kind of has, is you're able to live a lot of the +2 attacks. A lot of players are couched for that, but not a lot of players are couched for a +4 Kowtow Cleave. And being able to one-shot things so that the Sinister can't heal you up, or the Archaludon doesn't have room to maybe get a stamina boosts, the King Gambit just one-shotting thing kind of gets rid of those problems, as we see Abdullah switch in the Sinister there. And Diego actually opt for a Protect there on the King Gambit.
Yeah, Sinistra is a really fun switch here. You know, first we will see this Pelipper attack into the opposing Archaludon for a little bit of damage, and I think most importantly for Diego, a stamina boost. But Sinistra doesn't have to attack here. You could opt for Strength Sap to try and lower the attack of that King Gambit. I believe you would set off Defiant if you do that, though. So it's possible that that Abdullah is just trying to find an opportunity here to land a burn on the opposing Pokemon with Machagacha.
Yeah, and as you said that, and as Abdullah locked in that Terra Fairy, that's exactly what's going through my mind as well, is Abdullah really has no direct way other than the Rage Powder and fishing for a burn here off of Machagacha. I'm really curious if this Terra Fairy is going to let you live the Kowtow Cleave. That Weather Ball, though, does so much damage. Draco Meteor, instead of something like an Electro Shot, maybe predicting a Archaludon switch in for the Pelipper, bringing the Pelipper down to Focus Sash. Regardless, the Archaludon is going to go down. This Machagacha, though, if it's able to get a burn, is able to weaken this King Gambit. Doesn't get it, though. Stamina Boost is going to go off first.
Yeah,
it doesn't get it, and Kowtow Cleave follows up and KOs the Pelipper.
I mean, I guess if you're looking for a consolation prize, the Kowtow Cleave, you know, your Pelipper took 2 attacks there, so it's not like those 4 attack boosts came into play there. I think that the presence of the Sinistra on the board right now was enough to scare away any Sucker Punches that turn. Whether or not that'll still be the case moving forwards, we'll have to see, as Abdullah opts to send the Archaludon back out onto the field from his side of the field, and you know, that is a much more tempting target for a potential +4 Sucker Punch if you don't think your opponent's going to go for a Rage Powder here. So a bit of a mind game this turn.
Yeah, and I thought that play last turn from Diego is very interesting. Getting rid of the Pelipper didn't really seem like the threat, because now what Abdullah really has here is they threaten a knockout into the King Gambit here. The King Gambit kind of has to protect. Diego's Archaludon is at -2, so something like a Flash Cannon isn't really going to be doing a lot of damage, even though it's super effective against a Sinistra, as we see it fire off here. Maybe bringing Citrus, it doesn't even bring it to Citrus Berry range, but you really need it, maybe something like a critical hit to kind of get rid of the Sinistra, because what you're able to do if you're Abdullah is now you could just spam Electro Shot as your Sinistra clicks Rage Powder. And because Diego doesn't really have an option in the Mousehold to redirect attacks in their own way, this King Gambit is in range of just Electro Shot, and the longer you wait, the more special attack boosts Archaludon has, and the more steamroll potential Abdullah has as well.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing about, honestly, all of the Pokemon on the field right now, minus the Sinistra, is that the Archaludon, the King Gambit, they can really start their own, you know, damage engines, if you will, if they're just left on the field alone enough. In the case of Abdullah, you can go for all those Electro Shots, you can get those special attack boosts to the point where it doesn't really matter if you're doing resisted damage. For Diego, he always can threaten clicking another Swords Dance, or even start using the stamina boost to his advantage. We do get the reveal of his final Pokemon. It's going to be that Dragonite holding a Life Orb, so a very offensive-oriented Dragonite. We do see another Flash Cannon into the opposing Sinistra. This time will activate that Citrus Berry, but Abdullah's own Archaludon, the last Pokemon to attack this turn, does indeed target down that Electro Shot into what was the King Gambit, but is now the Dragonite. And this is an inner focus Dragonite, so it is not going to have the benefit of multi-scale. It will have to contend with these special attack boosts, but is still able to hold on with just a little bit of health left.
And with the rain gone, at least Abdullah doesn't have the option to go for any more Electro Shots. So that steamroll potential we kind of talked about is kind of stopped here, but you're still staring down a Archaludon with +2 special attack. So these Flash Cannons are going to be able to do a lot of damage, or even if you opt for a Draco Meteor into the Diego's Pokemon is going to do a lot of damage. And this Sinistcha is such a problem. Is something like an Extreme Speed and a Flash Cannon from Diego's side would be able to finally get rid of it. But because you had to switch out your Kingambit, you've gotten rid of those +4 boosts, and you don't have as much pressure into some Abdullah's Archaladon anymore.
Dragonite's Stomping Tantrum plus the Flash Cannon on Diego's side of the field will be enough to pick the knockout on the Sinistcha, so it is just down to the Archaladon on Abdullah's side of the field at this moment in time, at least. And that Draco Meteor will connect with the opposing Pokemon as well, so it comes at the cost of your boost, but I think that's a very great trade to make, as Diego now is down the Archaladon, just going to be that Kingambit and the Mousehold remaining in the back.
And this was really, really well played from Abdullah. Again, positioning their main piece, kind of the king, if you will, around these two Follow Me Pokemon, or these two support Pokemon, that being the Mousehold and the Sinistcha, being able to redirect all of Diego's attacks, or redirecting any of the setup that Diego was able to do to really make sure this Archaladon lived and had full HP, as kind of Diego whittles themselves down.
Oh my god.
Kind of taking the slower approach there. But we see Abdullah actually lock in Population Bomb just to lock it in. No need to follow me. I'm just going to put myself to max defense and body press everything.
Yeah, and I love just getting to the sports state at the end and recognizing that, you know, unlike other Kingambit, the one that Diego brought to this game does not have any fighting type attacks. So will, you know, Kowtow Cleave could do some decent damage if you don't have those attack boosts, but Extreme Speed, since it's not able to pick up that KO on the opposing Mousehold, this is just going to be a very, very bulky Archaladon. And I love just seeing how Abdullah clicked in that turn, because you could tell that he was thinking, if I go to +6 defense, will Body Press do enough damage to pick up the KO on the Dragonite? And I think he made the very wise choice to just not risk it, go for the Flash Cannon. You know, not have to worry about anything weird happening there. But now that he will have maximum defenses here, it's going to be very easy to pick up the KO on the opposing Kingambit in the next turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only is it easy to get the knockout, as well as it's kind of impossible for Diego to break through even with a critical hit. Archaladon has so much HP there that even if you target it into that turn, it does almost nothing as compared to if you had something like Low Kick. Diego played this really, really well, though, and I was really impressed the way they kind of had the early game with the Swords Dance and things like that. But they fell a little bit short here with their momentum when they had to switch it out, I think.
I agree. And while the Mousehold is back on the field and does still have that Ghost Terra typing, which means you can't necessarily go for a body press this turn, we saw Flash Cannon before. We saw that it was able to do enough damage to pick up the KO on the Dragonite. I'm pretty sure it would be able to pick up the KO on the Mousehold here as well. So you really just have to play the mind game of, do I have to worry about my opponent protecting? Do I have to worry about my opponent maybe going for like a Follow Me here? In this case, Diego did opt for the Follow Me, but Abdullah made the right choice, using a Flash Cannon to connect, pick up the KO on the Mousehold. And again, even though this Kingambit will be able to deal damage to the opposing Archaladon this turn, probably won't be able to do much next turn. I guess you see
Diego
punch,
going for the Swords Dance, and if you do get that critical hit with the Sucker Punch, you have a way. I think if Diego was to play that with, you know, hindsight, if you were able to read Abdullah's mind, you go for something like a Protect on the Mousehold, you Swords Dance, then you Follow Me, go for another one, and then you would need a critical hit on top of that. So the stars would really have to align for you, but Diego recognizing that they have to go for the Swords Dance there, and that this Sucker Punch has the critical hit. Unfortunately not, as this +1000 it has to be at this point. Body Press is going off in this Kingambit. It's going to be a 2-0 for Abdullah there.
Yeah, very well played from both these trainers.